Here we
Hey,
are.
everybody. You should have heard
the
first
first
take.
intro. Yeah. But
Uh.
due to a clerical error on my behalf,
Mm,
we are starting again.
it was just a misspelling.
And as we said just a moment ago,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a misspelling, it was a miswording.
It's
well,
true.
I was
First two letters.
letters off. Yeah. We welcomed social media.
Hello.
Hey.
We mused about the reality that it's just the three of us.
Mhm.
We sang Will Smith,
We did West Philadelphia, born and raised.
but just the three of us.
Oh, that was that Will Smith.
Yeah. You were there. And then we talked about
I didn't know that
Josh's
was Will Smith.
perfection. Isn't it?
I don't know.
We can make it if we try, just the two of us, you and I.
He's not a good rapper or singer.
Josh, you know your rap. Is that Will
He's
Smith?
a good slapper.
Listen, I'm not that kind of rap.
Lecrae, Will Smith.
I'm not necessarily that kind of rap either.
Okay. It is probably not. It looks like maybe Bill Withers, Grover Washington Jr.
You guys totally
No,
missed
Will Smith, right there, just the two of us. So I'm just Googling it right now.
Alright.
There's an ad. Sorry about that.
This take is just about as good as the first one.
I think
Yep.
so.
And anyway, we're going to get started in just a second. Ooh. Long intro. I wonder if that's Will Smith's real son.
I hope we don't get flagged for this. That'd be awkward.
No, we got 30 seconds.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
This is Will
It's
Smith.
Will Smith.
Yes. Sounded like him, didn't it?
Will Smith owns that YouTube and Facebook, just so you know.
Credit given where credit is due.
Indeed.
He
Yeah.
could come and slap us.
Somebody had to say it. Let's start.
Let's do it.
Josh, you got everything in order?
I think so.
Okay.
Sunday morning.
Thanks for being here this morning, church. I'll greet you in the back on your way out.
Oh, good morning, Pastor. Hey, thanks for that sermon. It was pretty good. Not as good as David Jeremiah, but pretty good.
Oh, dang.
Pastor, we need to meet this week. I have something really important to talk to you about.
Sure. What do you want to talk about?
Oh, I'll let you know when I get there.
Ugh.
Pastor, I cannot believe what you're allowing them to teach in the kids' ministry. You mean to tell me my sweet little Johnny was born in sin?
Pastor, the finances are in trouble.
Pastor, I am not happy. What are you going to do about it?
Pastor, when are we going to sing In the Garden again? I'm so tired of Sovereign Grace. Monday morning.
Okay, www.indeed.com. Job type, full-time. Occupation, not a pastor. Location, far away from here.
Is there a right time to leave your church? Does that mean you have to leave ministry? Should you have questions like this? On this episode of Rural Pastors Talk.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Rural Pastors Talk, a podcast highlighting the advancement of Christ's kingdom in rural places, just like the town you live in. The rural church is not the baby pool we splash around in before moving into opportunities. It is not the place we're confined until we can take off those training wheels, and it is not God's penalty box as a punishment for breaking the rules. No, Jesus died for his people, and as long as Christ's people live in rural places, a vibrant, healthy, multiplying presence of his church will be there too. Hello, my name is TJ Freeman. I'm the lead pastor of Wellsboro Bible Church in beautiful Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, and I am joined by my brothers.
Hey, everybody, I am Joe Wagner. I am the MAD at Wellsboro Bible Church. Thank you for that acronym. That means I'm coordinating membership, assimilation, and discipleship here.
Because you got
WBC.
mad skills.
MAD. I'm the OG.
And if we
MAD.
flipped around the M and the D, it wouldn't have
it
sounded
wouldn't
right.
go quite as well.
What's going on, guys? Joshua McLaren, pastoral assistant, Wellsboro Bible Church.
Do you like your title as well?
I do.
Very good.
I like assisting.
Well, on this episode of Rural Pastors Talk, Joe hits me with his dad joke. Take your best shot. Sermon prep as devotional reading, a good idea or not.
This one's going to slay.
Leaving your church for another church. Is that ever a good idea? Or what about another vocation? And then a quote from Jared. I can talk. A quote from Jared C. Wilson. You can think of and chill, son.
You said earlier that the COVID voice. was
I
giving
know,
you
but-
pause. I think it's COVID brain.
Well, I have something going on there too. This is just tongue tie. I don't know. I haven't had enough food yet. You know what I had for lunch?
What?
Those green dusted tortilla chips.
Ugh.
I don't know what's on them. Not the ones that have a hint of lime.
Green dust.
They're green, and then they have a green dust.
Oh,
on
they're
them.
dusted on top of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's generally like avocado or lime.
Something like that. But whatever it was neither nutritional nor helpful to my brain. So hit me with your best shot.
Dad
Fire
joke?
away.
All right, here we go. I've got to read this because there's big words. Hold on a second. Why did the Hindu refuse Novocaine during a root canal?
Why?
He wanted to transcend dental medication.
Nice.
That's pretty good.
It's intellectual enough that it almost doesn't qualify as a dad joke. I thought it was going to be something like, what does the cheese say when he makes a jump shot? Swiss. All right.
Oh man.
So
I've got a cheese joke,
All
and,
right.
and also a chip joke, and the punchline is, "That's nacho cheese," but I'm not going to tell the whole thing.
that's good. That was enough. Using your sermon text for devotions, and when I say that, I mean the preparation you're putting into preaching. Can that double as devotions?
Okay, so that's open. Oh, is that what you asking that question right now?
Yeah.
So that's it. Can that is the possibility? Can it do it? Right.
Do you think it's a good idea? Is
Yeah.
really what I'm getting at.
For me, it's not necessarily a good idea. I don't. I don't know how to just say this, but sometimes I get so close to that sermon text, and I'm focusing so much on like teaching and how am I going to articulate this to other people, and then also you're always reflecting upon the truth and how it applies to your life and other people's lives too. I get so close to that for a week. Hey, let me say it this way. I think that it might be able to double as your devotion for like one day of the week,
Ah, okay.
but not for like all other 6.
Yeah,
How does
that's
that
good.
work?
I like that. It's a good thought. What do you think, Joshelino, the Italian devotion doer?
It is not my general practice. I will say the last 2 weeks, though, I was very busy with like different college talks I had an opportunity to do and a sermon. So along with the proverb of the day, I did just read them in the morning before my sermon prep. And I felt like it helped me prepare for application. And I'm thinking about, if the pastor is to be moved or the preacher is to be moved by the text that he's speaking or preaching on, what better opportunity than to just step away from my notes, my study, and just think, okay, how does this apply to me?
There's some validity there. Too.
Oh, who caught the tongue tie?
So not my regular practice, but I did it the last 2 weeks. So
Well said. Well, you supplemented, though, with the Proverbs. Yeah. Yeah. I have a hard time thinking of it like linear or in boxes and categories. So, like I stopped doing this devotional. Now I engage in practical sermon study.
Yeah.
It just kind of all to me is like,
In the Word.
yeah, it's time in the Word. So I think there's times where I have reflected a lot on the text personally, and I didn't. This will sound like funny language, but I didn't feel the need. Like I need to have a separate time now that I call devotional time, because I've been soaking in this truth. And then there's other times where it's like, I've applied the text to myself, and I'm thinking a lot that day about homiletics.
True.
And it wouldn't have been very helpful for me to try to make that my devotion. So, yeah, I think I agree with you, brothers. There are times where it is very devotional, and there's times where it's more shepherding, I think, in our prep. But, I don't think we should make rules
All right.
about what.
We all know a really faithful pastor who's very serious about the Word, who regularly uses it for his devotional, and it works for him.
He rules.
I don't know if he drives a van, but he does rule.
So, any other thoughts on that, guys, before we move on?
Nope.
Well, hopefully, listeners, that non-answer was helpful.
We gave good answers
I guess.
beforehand.
Yeah, that's true. So our topic today is leaving one church for another, and it's another, could be another church, could be another vocation,
Right.
could be another ministry,
Mm-hmm.
could be another whatever. So
This seems to hit pretty close to home for one particular person in this room.
yes,
Uh-huh.
Josh, when are you leaving?
Lord willing, not anytime soon.
Okay. So that must be you then,
That's
Joe.
me then, yeah.
Yeah. So you recently transitioned.
Yeah, so if you've been listening to Real Pastors Talk for the past 2 years, you would have heard me introducing myself as, hey, I'm Pastor Joe Wagner from God's Family Fellowship in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania.
Sometimes you would add church to the end of fellowship.
Sometimes I would,
Yep.
because some people don't understand. Yeah. But anyway,
Mhm.
I am no longer the pastor at God's Family Fellowship Church in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania. I am the MAD here at Wellsboro Bible Church.
Yes, which stands for
Membership Assimilation and Discipleship.
very good in a non-pastoral
A
role. right now.
non-pastoral role.
So you had an experience that we walked through together,
Mm-hmm.
in which you left your current ministry position for another ministry position, and that involved leaving churches in the same small town
Right.
that you live in. You came to another church. It involved leaving pastoral ministry for a staff role. This was a big deal.
It was.
And we were talking about this before, saying there's probably a lot of guys wondering, and I think maybe most honest pastors would say they have wondered at some point, is this still the right fit for me? I shared before feeling like that when things got a little beyond what I felt comfortable leading here, and just questioning, am I really the guy who should be doing that?
Mm-hmm.
I had a season where, selfishly, when I first moved here, the weather adjustment
Right.
and the distance from a Chick-fil-A were so challenging. I wondered.
We are 2.5 hours away from like the nearest Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, I know. And it's almost like you can't be a Christian and be that far away from a Chick-fil-A.
Not have the Sunday chicken.
That's right.
The no chicken
Then-
on Sunday
yeah,
chicken.
Yeah, I actually prefer Zaxby's. Don't tell anybody. I know. So, there are seasons where you may question, for maybe sometimes a selfish motive, maybe sometimes a really legitimate reason. Should I be here or should I go somewhere else? And having you just have walked through that, it occurred to me that often when we talk about this feeling on this show, we think about encouraging brothers to stay for the long haul. That's our reflex. And it's not that we discourage a transition, but we recognize that in rural ministry, there are a lot of temptations to go.
Right.
There's always the allure of bigger and better somewhere
Mhm.
else. There's always some of that insulated type thought that we've discussed on the show. And so we really want to call guys, come to rural ministry, stay in rural ministry. And now we're looking at, well, what could it look like if you actually would leave? So can you share with us a little bit about what kind of went through your mind and heart as you walked through that?
So I had every intention of retiring at God's Family Fellowship Church. That's what it was. I mean, 15 years there is no small thing. Through both part-time ministry and then also in full-time ministry. There came to be a point, though, where, and this was before COVID had hit, when I felt, and you had mentioned this a little bit earlier, I really began to question whether I was the right man for that job in that church in that moment in time. And I actually had gone to an elder and said to him, like, this feeling, I believe, is from the Lord, and it was strong enough so that I took a risk, and it was a risk. I went to one of our elders, and I said, I don't know if I'm the guy. And I didn't know what was going to happen after that conversation. If I remember correct, I do remember correctly. I said, I don't know if I'm the guy. I don't know if maybe you're the guy. I don't know if there's another guy that's out there. I don't know as if we need to bring another guy in to be part of what this is. It just is feeling like, in my particular gifting, I don't know as if I'm the guy to take this church to the next step, because I was I wasn't the pastor immediately as that church was planted, but soon thereafter, like 3 or 4 months after I was ordained as pastor there. So I'd been there from the very, very beginning, and I believe that the Lord helped used me and my gifts to plant that church. And like I said, my goal, my plan was to stay there forever.
And there was no pastor before you,
There was no pastor before me either.
so you're the only pastor in the church's history.
Yeah, exactly. And which did make it, there was added a little bit of difficulty in there. So 2+ years ago, I had that, and I went to one of our elders, and then COVID hit. And like, you don't necessarily, I think it's natural to entertain through those really hard years of COVID. It was natural to think, whoa, I am going to throw in the towel, and I'm going to go someplace else. And I think many of us had those feelings of, wow, this is really, really hard. But I think at that point, I set aside those feelings, and you just knuckle down. You just do what the Lord calls you to do, to lead that church, and you do your very best. And through COVID, it was a really difficult time. Within the past 4 months now, the Lord, I would say that there was like 3 inflection points or 3 crisis points. Not crisis like, oh, Joe's in trouble and he better get out of here before something goes down, or, oh, the people don't like Joe anymore, because that wasn't the case whatsoever. But there was 3 points that the Lord had brought me to remind me of that feeling that he had given me before. Like, hey, remember this. Hey, remember this. Hey, remember this. And then that feeling that the Lord had somebody else prepared to take GFF to the next stage of the game, and it would be good, and it would be part of God's plan. And so it was a releasing part for me. I still feel a great weight of responsibility for those people. I've shared they're my joy and my crown. I love them. We've, it's very, very close relationship that we have built up. But it just really felt like there was another man for this job. I need to be so careful because I love those folks, and I don't want to say anything clumsily. Somebody from the congregation at GFF.
Are you saying somebody from the church other than our moms might listen to this?
Yeah, I am. Somebody from GFF, and as I was trying to stumble around and explain to him, he said, hey, I understand it kind of got into a status quo. And it had been in a status quo for a while, and you just realized that was going to take somebody else with a different set of gifts to move it to the next step. And I'm like, you just said it really simply. And so that's kind of the long and the short of that particular journey. You probably have some more things to add into there.
Well, I was thinking about the fact that you're listing out kind of implicitly some of the steps that you walked through.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing you did was wrestle with it on your own. I
Right.
presume there was quite a bit of prayer before you just went to one of your elders
Right.
and said that. But then you did speak to your specific leadership about
Yeah.
it. I tend to think that would be a risk worth taking no matter who your leaders are. However, I realize that there are some settings that I have never lived in or walked through.
Mm-hmm.
And there probably are good cases where you need to keep that
Where
a little
you
more
wouldn't.
private.
Yeah.
But generally, it seems like...
Because I didn't go and tell him right away.
Right, sure. Yeah. Yeah, you want to pray and
It's
think.
just
and,
so unsettled and praying
Mhm.
and thinking it through, just like what you're saying. Yeah.
But when you bring this up, a couple things. One is God has given you your elders to shepherd you, and they see some things about you, and they see the whole picture of the church in a way that they can think about with a perspective you don't have. So, and that's good for your soul to be shepherded. Secondly, they are responsible spiritually for the church.
Mhm.
And if their pastor is thinking that he may need to move on or that there needs to be a big change and they're not aware of that, that puts them in a difficult position. So I think as often as possible, it would be wise to take the step you took of going to one of your elders and saying, here's kind of what's on my mind. You also did a second step that you didn't mention. You sought wisdom elsewhere.
Yeah.
We, in fact, had a conversation
Yep.
Around that time.
There's been points within the last 2 years where I felt so strongly that I was not the guy for GFF anymore, that the Lord had a different plan, that I had actually, I had come to you And I'm like, TJ, I don't know. I just don't know what to do. This is what I'm going through. This is what I'm feeling. And admittedly, that point was like one of those bottomed out points, like an emotionally low point. And I was like, do you have anything for me up there? But you weren't the only one that I had gone to. I mean, you were close, my friend, and I shared with you in confidence those sorts of things. And again, this was 2 years ago, right? So that particular conversation is removed from the present time.
Correct. Yeah.
I had pursued a lead on a church outside of the area. I had been looking on Indeed for jobs that I was qualified for that would be secular jobs. I felt really strongly about that. But at the same point, I didn't just throw away that responsibility that I still had to the church and to the people, and I still labored hard.
And that's one of your other implicit steps is you resolved to be faithful for as long as you were there. And I think that's really important. And that's what saw you through COVID.
Right.
Otherwise, you would have become a statistic and just, this is too hard. But you were resolved that God called you to a task. And, when we talk about being released, there's sort of a subjective nature about that where, I could convince myself, it's really warm in Florida, so I'm released. My skin gets all dry in winter. I have a medical condition. I'm released. You could do that, but that's not what we're talking about. There is a sense in which we have a responsibility for the flock God has called us to shepherd, and you can kind of get to a point where you understand this would be better if someone else were shepherding, but I'm not going to just drop the staff and run away.
And a love for them too. In my case, I mean, we had built up a relationship and love, and I've been here now for a month, and there are still times when I've got wet face.
Yeah.
And it just recently, it's just like, oh man, just because you do love those people so much. And I think that's important for pastors, that we emotionally care for the people that the Lord has entrusted for us. And that just does not turn off.
That's very true. Very true. So we had a conversation a couple years ago. I remember just thinking, I really hope that you can just press on. Like rather than looking elsewhere, maybe just double down and dig in, and you'll get through this season.
The things that we encourage pastors to do on this podcast all the time.
Yeah, that's right. And fast forward a couple years, we had some growth and some change here at Wellsboro Bible Church, and we started looking for a pastoral role, actually, quite some time back. We didn't put it out on Indeed or anything like this, or you would have seen it and applied.
I don't know as if I would have, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's true, because you're in a different place.
Yeah.
And so we had a conversation one day in an elders meeting, and I remembered how...
Not you and I.
No, not you and I. Me and my elders. We talked about some creative ways to meet this need, because it seemed like we had the need for a really long time, and the Lord was just not filling it. And that creates pressure and challenges, and there were some areas where we wanted to make sure we're not dropping the ball, and just felt sort of an urgency. And I had met with a number of mentors along the way, and almost across the board, they instructed, if you can find somebody who has your DNA already, you're so far ahead. You're a rural church in a small community in the middle of nowhere. You have some theological convictions, these kinds of things, and it's just difficult to have somebody parachute into that and be able to both learn the DNA of the church and fulfill the responsibilities they're given. And it's often very challenging. Doesn't mean it never works. So you just came to mind because we've worked pretty closely together. Very similar DNA, same small town, all of these things. But there's the obvious barriers. He's shepherding another congregation. And I remember mentioning it to the elders, and they said, hey, listen, if the Lord would want us to work through that together, he'd help us to work through that together. And unanimously said, why don't you go ahead and reach out to him? So I sheepishly reached out to you to see if there was any possibility that you were thinking that way.
And at
still.
first, this was the first time that you and I had met face to face since you were sick.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you were one of my first
Yeah.
meetings, I think.
And it
Yeah.
was a week before Christmas, and I remember you saying, "I didn't sleep last night because I want to ask you a question," and I'm like, "Oh no, what is going on?"
Yeah.
And yeah, you pick it up from there.
Yeah. So again, I just wanted to float it out there and see.
Yeah.
And certainly, we're not in the habit of trying to draw shepherds away from the flock that they're currently a part of. But again, kind of given that history we had talked about before, and just wondering if this might be something the Lord was
Right.
setting up, and knowing how well our churches have worked together, thought
Mhm.
if this were ever to work, this might be a way. And we explored a lot of different options
Yeah,
for
we
what
did.
that could look like.
Yeah, there were some behind the scenes sorts of things.
Yeah. And ended up that the elders wanted to offer you the possibility of coming on in a non-pastoral role,
Right.
which was a surprise, and a position where you could just kind of get to know the congregation, have a little bit of a break, and
And
something
at
that-
first, my nose was a little out of joint
yeah, well,
by
your
the non-pastoral nature of the position.
because
but
your email address,
is Pastor Joe Wagner
right?
at
Yeah.
gmail.com.
So I thought maybe that would be helpful for our listeners to think about is,
Right.
your identity is somewhat connected to your profession always. But as a pastor, there's a sense in which it's like my relationship with the Lord, my identity, my service to the church, all kind of melt
Mhm.
into one thing. So how did you wrestle through that?
Well, I was just going to go in that direction. It didn't take too long because as I was playing out how it would work in my head, and remember, we had some hurdles to get across, I realized that the wisdom of your elders was wise, and that it was wise for me to take a season for a while, and not as a pastor, and to be able to rest and not take on that role as, hey, here is the super senior spiritual leadership position. And we know that I'm in a coordinator spot, and I'm on staff, and I'm discipling and mentoring. So there is spiritual leadership there, but it's not where the buck stops. And for me, that was where the Lord had brought me to the point where I needed to be someplace where the buck didn't stop, to rest.
Yeah.
And so I realized the wisdom of your elders was very, very good wisdom. And there's a part of me where, like, hey, I just had to set it aside. And it wasn't that hard to set aside, to be honest with you. I am okay now with not being a Pastor Joe. Not people calling me that.
So would you say, as guys might be wrestling with this and they're really thinking maybe the Lord's calling me on to something else, they need to just be willing to let go of that as part of it, or should they be?
Where's your identity, I guess, is what you have to find. I mean, I know my Savior. I trust His word. I trust His wisdom. I know the giftings that He has given to me, and that purpose and the way that He has put me together to serve in the body. I can do that. I can encourage people. I can teach people. I can mentor people. I can disciple people. Like, I'm a people person. Like, that is the way that that's why He's made me, and that's where He's given His gifts, given me the gifts that He's given to me to be able to serve a church. And when I began to realize and see, oh my goodness, look at this job description. It's all people stuff. I don't have to worry about the color and the length of the drapes or the carpet or I mean, I can focus on the things that I'm pretty good at. And that was very, very refreshing, and such a breath of fresh air to be able to go, oh, let's do this then. It doesn't matter what I'm called.
How has it been letting go of the transition on the GFF end on your part, mentally thinking, you want to see a good shepherd come in there. You don't want to see people you love and care for hurting. What kind of advice could you give for somebody thinking about that?
In my situation, being in the same small town, I did some background work beforehand. Before I said I'm ready to go, or before because I didn't spring it on the church as a whole, and I didn't spring it on the elders all at once. Like, I went to my elders a month. We never had a date. Like, that was one of the beautiful things that God had worked out, because you were like, essentially, take your time and do this in a godly way, which was very, very good for me, because I was like, I'm going to take my time and do this in a godly way. And we lined up on that really, really well. And so I had shared with the elders at GFF, I was like, I really think that this is what the Lord's leading me to. And that was a hard conversation with all of them, but they were very, very supportive in that. We had built relationship for over the years that they cared for me, I cared for them. And ultimately, we wanted to do what the Lord was calling us to do. And so, for me, being a founding pastor and having quite a bit of capital there, and being in a smaller area, and me knowing a lot of other pastors, I started lining up guys. I'm like, hey, guys that I trusted, not that I don't trust everybody, but guys that I was close to. I said, hey, I think that this might happen. Would you be able to help GFF out in the transition? And so I'm not cherry picking guys, but I'm having guys that I trust commit to, I'll come in and preach. I'll come in and do this. I would be willing to do this even a little bit more frequently for you. So, and then I was able to take that to the elders and be like, hey, you know this guy, and I can vouch for this guy, and they will be here to help work you through that transition period and point. And also elders, and they actually came to me too, and they're like, we can do some of it. Like, we got some elders there that can preach. And so it wasn't like I was the only guy that was able to do the things that needed to be done. We had built up to the point where they were able to preach, and we had other trusted elders coming through to preach. And so still I'm like, oh, I wonder how they're doing this Sunday. But I know and I can trust that they are doing well. And they are doing well. I mean, there's some sadness there, but they are doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just for guys who might be on the other end of this, if you're receiving a pastor and it happens to be somebody from the same small town, I think it's important to think about how your church can be supportive to the church that's really losing somebody they love for the sake of a gain in your church.
Well, one of the things that you're not necessarily saying is a lot of those guys that I've talked to go to church here.
Yeah. So, we had it in our heart and said out loud that we really want to be as supportive as we can be. And we tried to walk through this, even though we needed somebody like yesterday here. We tried to talk through things very openly and make sure all the elders at both churches were on the same page before just, launching out in the direction that you and I thought was wise. We really trust the leadership of the elders at both churches.
Right.
Because there was such alignment there, it's, I think, been a really healthy and smooth transition.
There, like you had said earlier, there is a point where you got to get some stuff figured out with you and your elders before you make the announcement. But once the announcement's made, it is transparency all the way across the board.
Yeah, and that's really, really important. One other thing to think about here on this is Psalm 37:4 has been so instructive to me. So back when we were at a church in Florida, and we were thinking, is God calling us elsewhere? Should we stay or should we go now? We were fretting over not wanting to insert our will over the Lord's will. And, it'd be nice to be in Pennsylvania near grandparents. Well, that felt like kind of a fleshly desire and just unsure of how to process all of this. A dear friend gave me Psalm 37:4, which says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. So to the brother pastors who are thinking about this, some of you are wondering, am I right or wrong to think about a transition to another church? I think your guiding principle is this: delight yourself in the Lord. So it can't be about frustrations or running from something or problems or grass is greener. Those factors may be there, but what it needs to be about is you delighting in the Lord and having an unyielding desire to please him, and just trusting that the decision you make will be in line with his will because your delight is in him. That's just a biblical principle. And that is what should allow you in good conscience and joy to make a hard decision and go forward in that, trusting that the Lord is accomplishing his will no matter what choice you've made, because you're delighting yourself in him. One other thing, 1 Thessalonians 5:23 and 24. There's a benediction here, and I think it's what we really need to be reminded of in times like this. It says, "Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit and soul and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ." Here's the kicker. He who calls you is faithful. He will surely do it. And we need to remember, it's not just about our faithfulness, even though we talk about that a lot on this podcast, because we do want to see faithful brothers. But it's God's faithfulness that matters most. And as we keep our eyes fixed on him and seek to please him, he's going to work in us wherever we end up. Anything else you want to say about that?
I think we're good. We got it covered.
Josh, what did we miss?
Nothing.
Well, then we should probably go on to the SOS. Subscribe, offer review, and share. That's
Do it.
our SOS.
Bam.
And we would appreciate it if you would do that. We do want to try to unite more and more rural pastors. One of the ways that happens is by, we're not going to all drive to visit each other, but we can help this podcast get out so that we can connect with one another and connect with good resources. Things like the conversation that I think was really helpful, it was for me, on Cannabis and the Christian with Todd Miles. Something like Mike Conroy coming and talking about depression. Something like Stephen Whitmer coming and me accidentally saying we had a bromance that he quickly denied, and I've been embarrassed about ever since. These types of things, minus the last one, I hope are helpful to you. Conversations like we just had with Joe, I think that will resonate with some brothers who are really struggling to think carefully through something like a desire to transition, or maybe a question mark in their mind about should they transition. So we want to get rural pastors connected and expose one another to good resources. So if you could help us with that, you can make the algorithm believe that there's something valuable here.
Here's something that you can do too. In your review, why don't you share something in there, like a content idea? Ask us a question. What can we talk about that would be interesting to you or fulfilling to you that you want to know some more about?
In fact, I'm going to use this opportunity to issue the email challenge.
Dun, dun.
I dare you.
Double dog.
Triple dog
Baby.
dare you to send us an email at
RealPastorsTalk@gmail.com.
with a question or a comment
Mm-hmm.
that we can discuss here on the episode. We love doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd love to hear from you. So challenge has been issued. Do you accept it? Let's see. But yeah, subscribe, offer review, share it. We appreciate it. You know what else we appreciate?
Stuff.
Rural
Pastors.
can use.
Review.
That's right. You sparked an idea in my mind, which is why I call you Sparky.
No, you don't. That's the first time ever.
Yes, it is. But you did become Sparky when you reviewed your Beats by Dr. Dre headphones
Yes.
delivered by Dr. Dre to your doorstep.
Crazy.
And I remembered that I had some trouble with my earbuds, which I'm hesitant to name after you dissed them a little bit.
Which ones?
The ones that are a little spendy. I know. They're white.
Mm-hmm. They don't fit in my ears.
But the truth is, I got them for Christmas, okay? So back off, bro.
Did you get them for yourself for Christmas?
No. I don't do that. So I received them as a Christmas gift, and I found that the silicone tips they came with were fine. I did have
If you
some trouble.
Extra large.
I did have some trouble with keeping them in
Ah.
a little bit. That is one of the negatives about them. So I did a little Googleizing, and I found this website called complyfoam.com. Complyfoam.com. And I found they have those squishy earphone or earplug type tips that they make to fit. They're an exact fit for several different companies. They have your Dr. Dre's as well. And you just wad them up just like you would a what is the word I'm looking for? What are those things made of? Those earplugs? They're foam, but foam
like
earplugs.
squishy, rubbery foam.
Aren't
Yeah.
they? Yeah, aren't they just
Silicone.
earplugs?
It's like that. Yeah, it's like earplugs. You roll them up, stick them in your ears, and
Yeah. Oh yeah, it like
Oh,
forms to your
there's-
ear.
and then it just sits in there,
Oh.
and you can't shake them out.
Really?
Yeah, you can do jumping jacks, cartwheels, lawn mowing.
I would not be able to do cartwheels.
That's true. I can't. get all
Lawn
the way
mowing I
around.
could do.
Yeah. So they are comfortable. They work really well. They are an exact fit from the manufacturer. They go in the case well also, because I read that some aftermarket earbud tips don't fit in the charging case.
You can put the tip
Dude, that's cool.
in the thing on the case.
What?
You could put those thingies on the actual AirPods and then put both of them in the case.
Yes, your AirPods function as though they were manufacturer's tips. I like them. I recommend them. They're $25.
yeah,
for
they're
a
pretty
3-pack.
inexpensive. Yeah.
Mhm. And they just work really well. So.
And you can get them in different sizes: small, medium, and large.
Yeah, I found that the mediums worked perfectly for me, and I wish I had not ordered the variety pack. I did that just to try.
Sure.
That said, I've not tried the other sizes. I just put the mediums in.
And you're like, ooh, baby.
Yeah.
Goldilocks. Perfect.
Yep, that's right. So that is my
Huh.
recommendation. I have no negatives
cool.
about them yet. The only negative is about earbuds in general. You have to make sure to operate the Q-tip first.
I was going to say last week when I brought the Beats in, I was like, I took them out and I opened them up and I'm like, ooh, boy, I better clean these off. There's something about earwax. It's just gross.
So I have the joy of playing on the worship team here on occasion.
Ah, yes, the shared in ears.
Yes. So we're not trying to be like cool, hip rock star. So
Sure.
our
They're
fog
very
machine, and our
Bubbles.
laser show and our
Are
bubbles
non-existent.
are right up there with our zip line into the pulpit. And-
Non-existent.
But we did decide not to have real monitors on the stage because it was noisy and we want to hear the congregation singing. So we wanted to decrease the volume on the stage, which meant we had to put headphones in to hear. And we share those headphones,
Mm-hmm.
and they are earbuds. And the policy I have adopted is don't look at them. Just
jam
shove them in. Yep. And that seems to work.
I have a question before we move off this.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were Snoop and Dre, which one of us would be Snoop and which one would be Dre?
No, you should save that for your cold open,
Ooh,
not your
there we
your
go.
discussion for next week.
Okay.
That's
Stay
that's
tuned
your
next
banter
week.
show.
Yes, come back next week for shizzle.
Oh, nizzle.
Is that a euphemism for a bad word I just said?
I don't know.
Okay, I hope not. There's grace and mercy. Joe, you found a quote.
Yeah, from our man Jared Wilson.
Jared C.
Have a blast loving Jesus, serving the church, minding your own business, and keeping your hand to the plow, and you won't give a thin cent what people say about you. Jared C. Wilson.
Channeling his inner Spurgeon.
Yeah. He did channel it at the end, but having a blast. I don't know if I can see.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No, that you're right. But the plow and the thin scent.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those are the things.
Definitely Spurgeon-esque.
Spurgeonic. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
Nope.
Okay.
Can't do it.
Filter.
It was filtered up.
Well, in that case, we should say goodbye.
Adios.
Goodbye and raise your Ebenezer.
Thank you for joining us for another edition of Rural Pastors Talk, a podcast highlighting the advancement of Christ's kingdom in rural places just like the town you live in. Josh, where can people learn more?
Well, they can find us on Facebook, Rural Pastors Talk. They can tweet at us at Rural Pastors, or they can email us, ruralpastorstalk@gmail.com.